The topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
Did you know women represent just 3% of Fortune 500 CEOs and less than 15% of corporate executives at top companies worldwide? Have you wondered what the secrets are to getting into the top ranks, whether in the private or public sector? Do you want to figure out how to stop being held back in your career or passed over for promotion? Then you're in the right place. Hi, I'm Dr. Madeline Ann Lewis, President and CEO of the Executive Women's Success Institute. I have decades of experience in the military, the federal government, and corporate America, and my mission is to help women succeed and tap into their full potential. I want to reach 1 million plus women around the world to become the leaders they are meant to be. So if you want to move into a management or executive level position, or maybe you are a female veteran transitioning out of the military into business entrepreneurship, then reach out to the Executive Women's Success Institute at 301-693-3284. Let us get you on the fast track to success. Well, hello and welcome to the Success for Women show, where you can view us on Talk 4 TV and listen to us on the Women to Women Network. I am Dr. Madeline Ann Lewis, your host, and my mission is to help women accelerate the path to success. And our topic today is the invisible loss, and you're going to be surprised at what that means. And my guest is none other than Miss Laverne McKinnon. Let me just give you a little bit of background on Laverne. Laverne McKinnon is a grief coach, career strategist, and speaker who helps executives, entrepreneurs, and creatives navigate transitions, whether embracing a pivot, stepping into leadership, or recovering from career disruption. As a senior entertainment executive, she developed Emmy and Golden Globe nominated series at CBS and Epix, and executive produced Netflix's Girl Boss. She teaches at Northwestern University, and she mentors through the Cape Leadership Fellowship. I want to bring on and introduce to our platform today, Miss Laverne McKinnon.
Hi, Dr. Madeline. I'm so excited and happy to be here and to be chatting with you. It's a real honor.
Well, it's an honor to have you on the platform. You know, when I was reading your background and some of the things that you've done, I mean, it's just phenomenal. So we're just glad to have you here to share some of your success nuggets. But before I get started, I always read the standard bio on my guests, but then I like to ask my guests to I just want you to tell us what you want us to know about Laverne McKinnon.
I love this question because hearing you read that bio, I was like, oh, that actually sounds okay. That's not so bad. But what's hidden behind that bio is the hard truth that after 10 years at CBS and being part of the team that took the network from last place to first, I was fired from that job. And I completely blindsided, absolutely devastated. And the work that I do now is so informed from that moment in time where I did have the rug pulled out from underneath me. And some other things that I feel like I'd love for people to know is that I'm a wife, I'm a mother. I have 2 daughters, both adopted. My eldest is adopted from China, and my youngest is adopted through the LA foster care system. And I'm not saying anything original here. Being a mom is the hardest, most fulfilling job I've ever had.
Wow. And like I said in the beginning, people are going to be surprised at the topic where I said the invisible laws, because we're actually referring to, even calling you a grief coach, we're referring to the career and the different things that happens to people in their careers and how they may react to it. So tell us, now you talk about career grief. What is it? And how is it different from burnout or imposter syndrome?
Yeah. So career grief in the simplest form is when something at work changes that you really, really, really did not want to change. And so I spoke about my firing, layoffs, downsizing, but career grief also encompasses the investment that you have made of your time and energy and resources to get a project across the finish line, and maybe it loses funding or it launches and it's not well received. It's marketing mishaps, professional embarrassments, essentially any type of grief that is not recognized, validated, or supported. And so some people listening might be, or watching might be thinking, wait a second, how is something that happened at work a grief event? Yeah. And so it's a form of grief that bereavement experts call disenfranchised grief. Okay. And so it's valid. It's not something that I just made up because I felt really, really bad about what happened to me. But it took me, Dr. Madeline, 10 years to figure out that the feelings I was having about a professional heartbreak, that it was grief.
Wow. And that's, and to be honest, a lot of people go through it, and some probably don't even recognize what it is. I mean, just to the point where if you wake up in the morning and you think to yourself, oh man, I really don't feel like going to this place, because of the things that you have to go through and the things that you have to put up with, that sends a lot of people into depression. And sometimes they may not even realize that it's the job or the career, the profession or whatever it is that's doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because grief is a direct result of how deeply we were attached to a person, a place, or a thing. Yes. So you and I could have been working at the same company. We both have been laid off. You are like, awesome, great. I'm going to go on to my next adventure. And I'm lying on the floor sobbing and crying because you were not attached to the role in the same way that I was. And you mentioned burnout and imposter syndrome earlier. And so what happens is when we don't give ourselves permission to mourn and we don't acknowledge the grief, it doesn't go away. Unfortunately, it starts to leak out. And so it leaks out in the form of burnout, cognition issues. It's like memory loss, not being able to put 2 thoughts together, sleep, appetite is disrupted. And so it has a lot of symptoms that may be attributed to other things. And so I think it's important to say, hey, wait a second, was there something that happened that meant more to me than I thought it did?
Yeah. Because believe it or not, there are a lot of people that identify with their jobs or the position that they're in. And if that's disrupted or they're let go, fired for some reason, then to them, it's like, what now? What do I do? I don't know what to do with myself, so, and they tend to have that type of reaction too. They just don't know what to do next because they put everything into that one basket, so to speak.
And I was there completely. After I was fired, I did not know what to do. And even though I went on to other high profile jobs. And on the outside, the bio sounds really good.
Mhm.
On the inside, I was filled with imposter syndrome. And to be completely transparent, I was also filled with a lot of self-loathing because I thought, how could I have done that? How could I have messed up so horribly?
Wow.
And so that's where we get into some really interesting territory, because specifically with career grief, we
Mhm.
have the visible loss and then we have the hidden losses. So on the outside, I lost my job, I lost my title, I lost my salary, I lost a place to go, I lost my parking space. I tell you, Dr. Ellen, I love that parking space. It had my name on it. And
Mhm.
when I got that promotion, it meant so much to me. I felt like I had arrived. And so losing it,
Wow.
man, it was like a knife in my heart. But the most important thing is recognizing what are the losses that are underneath the job title, the salary, the benefits. And so my identity, like you were talking about, my identity was completely trapped and woven into that job. And so I lost my identity. I lost my purpose. I lost my sense of belonging. I lost my work family, my community.
Yes.
And so even though I went on to other jobs, I
Mhm.
didn't address the
Mhm.
hidden losses. And so that's why I continued to feel so much pain and suffering.
Mhm. Wow, that's interesting. And like I said, a lot of people don't even recognize that that could possibly be it, or they have put themselves in that position so deeply that if anything should happen, that they would spiral like that. It's just unbelievable sometimes to think about that. So tell us,
Yes.
what are some less obvious losses people experience in their careers that they don't always recognize as grief?
Yeah. So there are three types of labels of grief. And so I've been referencing what I'm going to call like a single grief event. I got fired. A project was defunded. So there's something very, very clear. There are also what I call death by a thousand cuts, a cumulative
Okay.
effect. So, and I see this a lot with job seekers who send out 150 resumes and they don't hear anything.
Yes.
Any single one of those events, it's like, it's a paper cut. But when you have 150 of them, then you're
Mhm.
like, what just happened to my finger? It's like, and so that like it becomes cumulative. And so again, that's where people sometimes get confused and are reluctant to label their experience
Mhm.
as grief because there isn't like a single defined event. And then there's a third category that is more ambiguous grief.
Okay.
Like for me, it took about 4 months between the difficult conversation that my boss was not happy with me before I was officially fired. So I didn't know what was happening. So it was really ambiguous because there was no clear ending. It was just like left in a free for all. And so I'm going to go back to this idea of attachment, that anything that you were attached to that was severed, that meant a great deal to you, it's irrelevant whether anyone else thinks that that's worthy of grief. It's worthy of grief because you were attached to it.
Exactly.
And so I'm just thinking of a client who didn't get a promotion that she'd been working towards for about 9 months.
Mhm.
And people are like, you are on a good track. Everyone loves you. It went to the person who had more experience. They've been around longer. Your turn is next. Do not worry. But she was so devastated.
Mhm.
And so people just couldn't wrap their heads around it. But for her, she had spent 9 months proving herself, going above and beyond. And so every time one of those things wasn't recognized, that was like another little paper cut.
Absolutely. And I have been down that road also. I mean, applying for a position that I knew that I was qualified for. I had someone on the board that I knew would be an advocate for me and all of that. And they wound up picking someone that wasn't even a part of the organization. And it was
Ah,
Ben. And the thing about the whole situation, I thought, I knew I was good at what I did. And I also knew this person did not have the qualifications that I had, but they picked them anyway. And about 3 months or so in, I think he quit. He couldn't handle the position. And they came to me and asked me would I step into that position, which I could have been. I thought back then, and I'm glad I didn't. But back then, I could have been petty and said, "No, you didn't give it to me when I, applied for it. I don't want it now." But I didn't. I took the position, and it did spiral my career. So when I look back on it, I think, well, it's a good, thing that I didn't turn it down when they offered it to me, because it led to other things. But it was just that I kept thinking, why would they put him in a position that they knew that they had someone more qualified for? So like you say, I was devastated. It was like a slap in my face, so I like I said, I've been down that road. I can relate to people that feel that way. Yeah.
Yes. And I really appreciate what you're saying, because it feels like within that you were able to say, ouch.
Mhm.
And it's one of the things that I encourage people to do is, in professional settings, we don't have permission to say ouch. But at home, it's so important with our trusted friends, the people who are close to us, to say ouch and not bury it. Because if we don't say ouch, then the grief starts to leak out in other ways.
Absolutely.
May I ask you a follow-up question around that experience?
Mhm.
When you decide in that moment, if you can recall, when you decided when they came back around and said, "Hey, will you take this position?" What
Mhm.
were you saying yes to? Like, how were you able to overcome the
Mhm.
ouch?
Well, I think because, like I said, I knew it was myself, and it was three, because it was four candidates. It was myself, and the other candidates uh, were all men. I was the only female applying, and I I looked at it as though, okay, do you just want a male in this position because you feel like they can handle it better, or do you want someone with experience in this position? And so when they came to me and they asked me to step in the position, I thought, for a little glimmer there, I was like, yeah, I should just tell them to stick it.
Yeah, probably that would have felt so satisfying. At least I would have been satisfied.
But I guess even though I hadn't heard the saying then, I'll say what Michelle Obama said: when they go low, we go high. So that's why I decided, But it was one of those things where at the position, I knew I could do it. And so, although I was a little angry at them for doing it the way they did it, the fact that they came back to me and they asked me to step into the position, and I also knew it was an important position and something that was needed in the organization, and so I went on and I stepped into the position. And as you said, I had a buffer when I was turned down for the position. I had like outlets, people, someone I could talk to and to vent. So I didn't have to hold it all in. And I think if I had held it all in and not be able to vent and just talk to someone and tell them how I felt about it, be able to yell about it, like, how could they do this to me? I think then, and I even have a part of it in my TEDx talk that I did. I even talked about it in that, because I think it was an important story that a lot of women, especially, is experience. So and so I just, like I said, there was that one glimmer that said, but I felt that it was more important for me to do it, to show that yes, you could have a female in this position. It's not just a male position because you feel they can do it better. Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
And you just touched on another form of cumulative or ambiguous grief,
Mhm.
which is being passed over because of race,
Yes.
gender.
Yeah.
And so,
Huh?
because it's so much a part of what happens in, at least I'm going to say, like in the US, in terms of the workforce,
Mhm.
we just look at, or I'm going to say, I just look at it, it's like, oh, that's just part of what happens.
Yeah.
and I don't recognize it
Mhm.
as something that's really stepping on my values and what's important to me.
Mhm.
And so over time, though, there becomes a tonnage of that.
Mhm.
And yet it's like, well, that's just the way it is.
The way it is, and
But
like,
that's grief. I mean, there's grief there.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, but like I said, it all worked out in the end, and now I can use it as a story to help other women to move forward and not get stuck in a tunnel saying, well, maybe I'm not good enough. Start thinking, having these what if thoughts. Well, they didn't
Yeah.
want me. Maybe I'm not as good as I think I am, or something like that. So, and I think that's a part of that ends up being a part of the grief thing, period too, where you start doubting yourself,
Oh my gosh.
yeah.
Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah. I had an image in my head of who I was at CBS. Like part of my identity was that I was competent and capable, which is why I was
Hmm.
promoted every 18 to 24 months. And so every time I got one of those promotions, it reinforced this identity that I had until I was fired.
Hmm.
And then, oh, wow, to have to be able to rebuild that because I was filled with so much imposter syndrome. And I told myself all these stories. And there's a framework that I use when I support people who are working through through career grief. It's called RISE, RISE. And you and I just spoke about the first letter R, which is recognize the loss and say, ouch.
Uh-huh.
The second step stands for I, is investigate the meaning.
Okay.
And so when I started to learn more about grief, I was able to question, am I incapable? Am I incompetent? And so the path forward, there's data over drama. Okay, what is the data that supports I'm incompetent, I'm incapable?
Exactly.
And so when I just looked at it very factually, I was like, well, I've gone on to multiple jobs, so I'm not 100%. But then I also had to say, what is actually mine to own? Because being fired just doesn't come out of the blue.
Exactly.
And so what I was able to recognize and own as I investigated this meaning that am I incompetent or am I incapable is that I essentially grew up at CBS. I worked there for 10 years. And so I had a real professional maturation happen. And as I rose up through the ranks, I became more confident. And so I would speak out more. And at that time, CBS was not a culture that valued independent thought. And so I was like an upstart teenager, and it was like, I just had to be slapped down. And so it was, very much like you just never said anything that would be construed as not 100% supporting what my superiors were thinking.
Your point of view, so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's always one that can get a person and probably both you and I both in trouble a lot of times, because it's like if one of those things, if you see something, you want to say something or you want to do something about it. And a lot of times it depends on what it is and who it is. They, the top don't want you a lot of times to be visible like that, saying something or doing something about it. And that's another factor that comes into play. And those are all the things that, when you go through that, instead of doubting yourself, the first thing looking at, well, what did I do? Stop and think maybe, hey, why did they do this? What was the reasoning behind their, thinking that they needed to fire me? Because it doesn't necessarily have to be you. Now, if you're a person that is not working at that level, then own that, go ahead and own it. But if like you said, you were doing the job, you were capable, you were confident, then don't let the first thought be, what did I do? Or am I not, capable of doing this job? Is that why they fired me? Start looking at it from the point of view of, okay, what is their problem? Let's look at,
It's like really like looking at all the data. Yeah, exactly. Because there may also be external factors as well. And so I'm thinking, they pulled support on my initiative that I've been working on for months and months and months. But then I'm like, okay, they're jerks. They don't get it. But then I have to widen the lens and go, oh, wait a second. There are tariffs. There's a war. It's like there are other factors. It's never all us or all them. And so I feel like part of my belief system is the path to success is just analytically, rationally, just like looking at what's the data, because I want to know, how did I screw up? Because I don't want to repeat that mistake. Exactly. And so I wasn't reading the room. It's like, I'm, feeling all, cocky and strong and all that. And I missed the signals.
Exactly. And I understand that completely. And that is so, I think that's so true for a lot of us when we enter into that type of situation. We have not read the room because we think everything is going fine because we know we're doing what we're supposed to do the way we're supposed to do it. And so we don't see maybe the little thing or the little sign that might be there. We may overlook that, but that's when I say you have to stop and take a step back and say, okay, now I need to start reading this room and see what was actually going on that I missed. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So, but why do you think so many high performing people struggle to name what they're feeling about a setback?
Because it doesn't align with one's identity as being successful. And I think, Dr. Madeline, you and I both know, and I'm sure everyone watching and listening, it's like success does not come without failure. Success doesn't come without mistakes. Success doesn't come without face plants. However, we live in a work culture where there's a lot of talk and performance around, oh, fail faster, fail quicker, fail better. But the truth is, if we say publicly or own this is a failure, then we get labeled as a failure. And so our work cultures don't actually support, and I think it's like one of the biggest flaws in Western workplace culture is not really having the proper ways to look at and analyze, both like intellectually, but also from an emotional perspective, what went wrong. And so I don't blame leaders for saying that wasn't a failure or, oh, it was Dr. Madeline's fault, because it's like it's self-protection. But over the long term, it actually it completely strangles innovation. It completely guts the trust that's needed for teams to be able to build. It impacts efficiency, productivity. It's
Yes. And even when I was going through what I went through with the promotion, I knew, because I was with an organization that was basically a male-dominated organization. So in a way, I wasn't surprised that they chose the male, because in their eyes, most of the positions that were being held at an upper level, it seemed they felt men were more capable of doing it if it was more on the technical side. Now, if it was on the admin side, oh yeah, we can place, her in it. It's okay for her to be in it then. And I think that had a lot to do with the organization too, the mindset that men belong on one side of the house where the females belong on the other side of the house. And so when you try to cross over because you know that you're capable of doing both, really, then that becomes where they have to look at it and say, oh, well, I'm going to go with him because I think he'll do it better. Whereas a lot of times, no, that's not necessarily the case. And it wasn't the case in what happened with me because of what the work was. So, but live and learn, they had
There's the unconscious and conscious bias that exists.
Yes.
And it's one thing that I've learned to develop. It's not a magic elixir, but finding an affinity match. So for example, I want to learn how to golf because a lot of the people that I interact with, especially men, love to play golf. And so
Yeah.
I like to try to find something that allows me to have an organic, natural connection to
Mhm.
try to work against the unconscious or conscious bias that exists,
Mhm.
because I want to start to create like a little path of, oh, maybe Laverne as a mixed race woman
Mhm.
is actually capable of something in addition to admin. And so will give me an opportunity or a shot because I've been able to create, to show that we have something in common that allows them to potentially see me a little differently, that can break through that bias.
Yeah, and that's what they tend to a lot of times, and this has been from way back. You've heard the fact that men tend to make a lot of deals on the golf course because that's where they are, that's where they spend their time, and if you're not there to know what's going on, sometimes you get left behind, the curb because you don't know how to play golf. And it's interesting that you brought that up because my first book, when I did my doctoral dissertation, and then I turned it into a book. I titled it "Playing from the Blue Tee: Women in the Federal Government." So it's just interesting that you brought that up. But yeah, you do those things, and that's why I'm a firm believer when you're in an organization. That's why you have to know as much as you can about that organization, because you have to understand how it thinks, how the people, especially the people up top, how they think, and for the most part, so that you can really try to understand and not get thrown into these loops. Now, that's not going to always be the case that you won't, but if you learn as much as you can about the organization and do the little things that you might need to do to stay visible, so that when it's time for you to move or to be promoted or someone to advocate for you, it's because they know that you been in those places, you've done certain things to put yourself out there to be visible, so they can say, "Oh yeah, well, maybe that no, we maybe let's just try her for a little while."
Yeah.
Because I've told my clients, when you go for a position and they have that hesitancy, just tell them, "Hey, put me in a position for 30 days and let me show you what I can do." And then if you feel like I'm not capable of doing it or I can't do it, then we can, come back and discuss that. Because sometimes it's a matter of just letting them know, hey, I can do it just as well as anyone else can do it. Okay.
Yes, yes, yeah. And um, I feel like that having to prove oneself, that
Yeah.
that can like, and I'm also a big believer in hard truths, that I had a coach who early in my career who said, love the truth first, love yourself second, love others third. And she's
Okay.
like, and 80% of the truth sucks. I was like, I don't know if I necessarily believe that, but it's that I can complain about it, or I could surrender to the truth and then figure out, okay, how do I finagle my way to
Yeah.
get to live my purpose and honor my values?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's the thing. You want to stay, when you talk about honoring your values, and you want to make sure that you stay true to yourself and to your values and everything. But you, like I said, you just make sure you understand the culture, so to speak, and how everything works. And I think that's what will help, especially women, a lot of times, when
Mhm.
they understand how the culture of an organization works. Yeah.
Yeah. Women are extraordinary. And I've witnessed this firsthand in myself and other women, that when we receive, no matter how horrible it is, but as long as we receive it, we are incredible problem solvers and we create.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. And when we try to deny, negate, put our blinders on, then we get out of alignment, and then we can no longer access our natural ability to create something from nothing.
Hmm. Mhm. So now you've said that grief has tasks, not rules.
Yeah.
What are the risks when people try to follow rules instead?
Yeah, there are so many grief rules. We talked about one of the primary ones, that grief is only related to loss of life.
Hmm. Hmm.
There's also like rules. Dr. Madeline, I'm so sorry for your loss. Take the weekend and we'll see you on Monday.
Hmm.
And so there's this unspoken rule that it's like, oh, as soon as you have the memorial or the funeral, then you're done. And grief doesn't work on that particular timetable. There's also confusing rules around, Dr. Madeline, why aren't you crying? Are you not upset about the loss? Oh, Dr. Madeline, you're crying. Like reel it in. It's like you're just emoting too much. So it's very confusing of these rules. And so what happens is that rules tell you that you're right or you're wrong.
Hmm.
And there is no right or wrong in terms of how we grieve.
Right.
We have preferences, and then we have these tasks. And so, I mean, a quick sidebar is that many people have heard of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief. And so anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, I'm forgetting one of them. But people believe they have to work through those stages of grief. Dr. Kubler-Ross created this framework specifically from observing people who were given a terminally ill diagnosis.
Exactly.
And so she never meant to say that it's linear or that everybody experiences this. So the tasks of grief, and I reference this briefly with the RISE framework, is that you recognize that there's a loss, you investigate the meaning, and then the third step is to create a ritual to have a good goodbye. Most times with career grief, we don't have a good goodbye. We don't have a chance to say farewell to the thing that we were attached to, but it doesn't mean that you can't craft a good goodbye for yourself. So, for example, I had a writer that I worked with whose screenplay was just never produced, and it was a passion project for her. So she created a ritual to say goodbye to that project. She printed the script out, and she dug a hole in her backyard, and she buried the script. And then she wrote a eulogy, and she read the eulogy out loud, apologizing to the script that she could not bring it into the world in the way that she had dreamed. And then she said, rest in peace. And it was that ritual that really allowed her.
That might be the acceptance part of it. Would that be her stage of acceptance, so to speak, I guess?
I think it's part of it, and which is interesting because acceptance can even come from recognizing the loss or investigating the meaning. And that's where like the rules of grief get people convoluted, because we flow in, we flow out, we move forward, we move back. And then the final task is embracing what's next. And so that's returning to, what are my values? What is my purpose? Because you can't go through a grief event and not be changed in some way. So the purpose of mourning is to integrate the loss into our lives as opposed to blowing past it.
Yeah, exactly. So tell me, how do you think grief, or I should say career grief, shows up in someone's decisions or their behavior?
Oh boy, I'm going to reference myself on this. The first decision that I made after being fired from CBS was to say yes to the first job that was offered to me, because I had no self-esteem. I was panicked. I'm the primary breadwinner for our family, and it was like, I just have to I gotta pay the bills. And then it showed up with, I was constantly second guessing myself. I was doing things to prove myself, like over prove myself. I lost my ability to be assertive or aggressive in the marketplace. I shrank. I just really, really shrank. And I see that in so many other people. Another way it shows up, I'm just thinking about this because and talking with a client the other day, that he kept minimizing. He's like, he was saying, it's not like brain surgery. My job wasn't that important anyway. I wasn't saving lives. And so I see that where people minimize because they
Yes.
don't want to say that that was something that was really important.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
This, I mean, when you talk about it, you know, like the career grief, I mean, I guess it was just interesting when I read, you know, when you talked about the grief part, and it was career grief. I thought, now this is interesting because I don't think anyone ever put those two together, grief with your career, you know, the, like you said, the disruption in any way in your career as you grieving at any point because of that. Yes, you might get angry, you might, you know, like you said, take the first, if you're fired, laid off, or whatever, take the first thing that comes along, but you don't ever think to yourself, I'm grieving over the fact that I've lost what I've had for 10 years, 20 years, what have you, however long it's been. And I had identified myself in this position that I was going to retire from this, you know.
Yes. Yeah. The dream. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That is so interesting. And it's just so much that we can cover. But you know, time goes so quickly. So tell me, if you had one piece of advice that you would leave with our viewers and our listeners as it relates to career grief, what would that piece of advice be?
Well, we touched on it earlier, and it's really to say, ouch, to take the time to sort of like, you know, like check, like if you take a tumble, you know, you fall off your bike or something, you take a minute and you go, oh, okay, is anything broken? Am I scraped? And so it's to say to yourself, oh, I'm sad. And sadness is fleeting. It can be intense. Grief is like, it needs to be tended to. There's a broken bone there. And I'm going to go a little bit further than the question asked me, but grief and mourning is a process of integrating a loss into your life and into who you are becoming. Because as I said earlier, you don't experience grief without being changed in some way. So you can't get over grief. You can't get past grief. So if I go back to the broken bone analogy, and this comes from an author, Mary Frances O'Connor. So like, if I don't set the bone in my broken arm, could I move it? Probably. Could I function? Maybe. Would it be really painful? Yes. If I set the bone, I can regain motion. I can go about my daily life doing the things that I love to do. If you x-ray that bone 10 years from now, 50 years from now, you will always see that it was broken. So it is with career grief. Absolutely. It will always be a part of you, but you get to choose how it influences and who it helps you become next.
Absolutely. So tell us, Laverne, if any of our viewers and listeners wanted to reach out to you, maybe to work with you in some way to help them through any career grief, how can they contact you?
I'd love to send people to my website, which is lavernmckinnon.com. And once you go there, you can sign up for my newsletter. And as part of the newsletter, I have a career grief group. And so I'm not going to say too much more about it because people can go to the website and check it out. But I hope folks do. And there are a lot of like free resources and articles and things like that that can help people in their grief journey.
Great. Thank you so much. It has been such a pleasure to be able to chat with you about this topic. Like I said, it's so much more I know we could have covered as it relates to that, because so many of us go through, especially women go through it, and we don't even realize that we're grieving or what the process is, or even how sometimes to pull ourselves out of it. So I do want to thank you for coming and sharing your nuggets with us. And it has definitely been a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you so much.
All righty. Well, just to let everyone know what's coming up next, I am excited to share that I have been named to the Women in Leadership Top 100 list for the 2026 by the Global Publishing Media Group. This list recognizes influential female leaders driving change across global industries, and I am just so honored to be among them. I am also excited to let you know that I will be a keynote speaker at the Own It X International Conference, which will be taking place May 14th through the 17th at the Emotions Resort in the beautiful Dominican Republic. I'm looking forward to that. They are having a graduation ceremony, and I will also be speaking to the graduates and also speaking to those that are looking to be speakers. So I'm excited about being able to be a part of that program. I'm also excited that, again, to let you know that the Successful Women Radio and TV show made the rank of FeedSpot's list of top 100 best career mindset and working women podcasts, and that we have gone from number 16 on the list to number 11. So if I have to say so myself, I think that's a good thing. This list highlights podcasts that empower women to build successful careers, navigate workplace challenges, and find true fulfillment in work and life. And so this is an honor to be recognized on that list. Also, if you have not viewed my TEDx talk that I did in Vancouver, Canada, make sure to do so. The topic was Show Up to Rise Up, or is Show Up to Rise Up. You can watch it on YouTube and just put my name in the search box, Dr. Madeline Ann Lewis, and it should come right up. If not, you can email me for the direct link at info@exwsi.com. As you know, I'm trying to get to 1 million+ views. Right now, it's at 246,511 views. So I want to thank those of you in advance for your support, those of you who have supported it, and those of you who will support it in the future. Continue to share, continue to like, and comment on the video. I am also a contributing writer for Own It magazine, where I contribute a article every month. Own It magazine is a magazine that is for a resource for personal and professional development, professional and business development. So if you'd like to get a free subscription, you can email me again at info@exwsi.com. I want to thank you again for watching us on the Successful Women Show. I'd like to thank my guest, Ms. Laverne McKinnon, for sharing such great nuggets with us today. I'm Dr. Madeline Ann Lewis, and if you'd like to reach out to me, you can always email me at info@exwsi.com. I'm also on all of the social media platforms, so you can also reach out to me that way. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, also to like and share this episode with others. Again, this is the Successful Women Show. We are here every week. I am your host, Dr. Madeline Ann Lewis, helping women to accelerate the path to success. Thank you again for joining us. I love you all to life. And as always, be well and stay safe out there.
This is